What's your greatest fear? I didn't ask if you had fears because you do. Some of you are more willing to admit that you have fears than others, but we all have fears. So the question is, what's your greatest fear? Does it have to do with your finances, employment, maybe those retirement funds? Are you running out of funds before you run out of life? How about your relationships? Children, grandchildren, spouse, parents? Is that your greatest fear? Could it be your health? Cancer, heart disease, diabetes? We can go on. What's your greatest fear? What is it? And how do you deal with that greatest fear? There's a story in the Old Testament about a king of Judah who came face to face with his greatest fear. I think his greatest fear would be that a number of the surrounding nations would band together just to wipe him out, because a lot of them didn't like him. And that was a fear for him. And when that came to pass, it was pretty frightening. 1 Chronicles, chapter 20. Open your Bible, if you would, please. 2 Chronicles, chapter 20. If you would, please, to this story about King Jehoshaphat. They came and told Jehoshaphat that these nations were banding against him. A great multitude was coming against him. In verse 3 it says, Jehoshaphat was afraid and turned his attention to seek the Lord and proclaim a fast throughout Judah. So Judah gathered together to seek help from the Lord. They even came from all the cities of Judah to seek the Lord. So the first thing that he did, when he found out that 3 nations had banded together with superior forces to come to wipe him out, was not to call his generals. He didn't talk about how many chariots he had or how many swords, shields, and soldiers. He didn't talk about strategy. He didn't talk about implements of warfare and defenses for the city. He called people together for one thing, and that is fasting and prayer. He decided to make prayer the first line of offense rather than the last resort. I used to work as a hospital chaplain and a hospice chaplain, but in the hospital chaplaincy, I would go into a room and announce myself as the chaplain and let them know I've come to pray for them. And quite often the response would be, has it come to that? Do you know something I don't know? Is it that serious? So you could be here for an ingrown toenail for all I know. I pray with everyone. Oh, you scared me to death. Sometimes people will say, well, we tried everything else, let's try prayer. But for the Christian, it's not to be that way. You are to pray about every crisis, everything that comes up. That's the first thing you do. You take it to prayer. Some lady asked her pastor, Pastor, should I pray to God about just the big things or the little things as well? And the pastor's response to her was, Madam, what could there possibly be in your life that God would consider big? It's all small stuff to him, so pray about all of it. And he's right. All things. Take it all to the Lord. Everything. Don't leave anything out. And don't assume that you can handle things on your own, because if you're like me, you can mess up even the smallest thing. So take it all to the Jesus. Take it all to him in prayer. Make sure that that is the first thing you do. Now, when he got everybody together, Jehoshaphat prayed a beautiful prayer. We're going to see it starting with verse 5. In fact, it becomes a model prayer. Now, I hesitate to call any prayer a model prayer because it tends to send the message that this is the magic formula. Pray according to this pattern and all your prayers will be answered in the affirmative. That's not true. It's a model prayer because it's instructive. It teaches us something about God, about worship, and about prayer, and there are things we can learn from it. But it's not a magic formula. In fact, I don't know that there are too many wrong ways to pray. About the only wrong way I can think of right now is not to pray. Everything else is okay. It has often been said the best prayers often have more groans than words. Sometimes just groaning before the Father is prayer enough. Just groan. I've had some of those prayers where words were insufficient, but the groans and the cries, they were eloquent. And the Father understood. He stood every groan, every pain, every cry, every tear. So I don't present this as a means of telling you, all right, this is exactly how you should pray. But it is instructive. Because theologically and practically, prayer and worship are the same thing. They follow the same patterns. Same thing. So let's take a look at this prayer. The first thing that he prays about is God. He doesn't pray about himself or about the problem. He starts off by praying about God. Verse 5, Then Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem in the house of the Lord before the new court. And he said, O Lord, the God of our fathers, are you not God in the heavens? And are you not ruler over the kingdoms of the nations? Power and might are in your hand, so that no one can stand against you. The first thing he does is to remind himself and all of Judah of just how big and how powerful God is. Now, our tendency is to look at the problem. And the longer you look at the problem, the bigger the problem begins to feel. And if you start looking at this molehill, eventually it becomes Everest. And you see no way out of it, no way around, because your focus is solely on the problem. Judah in his prayer, Jehoshaphat in his prayer for Judah reminds us that the main thing we are to do is keep your focus upon the solution for the problem and not the problem itself. And the solution is always God. And so he reminded himself and all of Judah exactly how big God is. The more you look at God, the smaller the problem gets. The more you look at his capabilities, his abilities, his power, his sovereignty, his majesty, his omniscience, his omnipresence, the smaller the problem gets, because it's all small stuff to God. The one who spoke the worlds into existence can handle any problem in your life, can he not? He's capable. And this is a good reminder. By the way, this is a good way to start off our worship services. You know how we usually start with a hymn of praise and adoration? All glory, laud, and honor to the Redeemer King, or something of that nature. We start our worship by looking at God, and we look at his majesty, his power, his dominion, his holiness. We start worship that way because that's where our direction is to be focused. Our attention is to be focused on him. It's the same thing in prayer. We start off by reminding ourselves just how big God is. So that's part one of his prayer, is how big is God. He reminds himself and Judah. And then the next thing he does is he reminds himself and Judah of what God has done in their past history. Did you not, O God, drive out the inhabitants of this land before your people Israel and give it to the descendants of Abraham, your friend, forever? So he now reminds himself and Judah of what God has done in their past. Ellen White said the only thing we have to fear for the future is that it's leading in our past history. So it's a good thing to remind yourself of what God has done for you in the past. Every new challenge, every new crisis, you know what? God's gotten me through stuff like this before. He did this for me. He did that. Now, I know that God has blessed you, and some of you may have a hard time thinking about it right now, remembering, especially if you're in a lot of hurt and a lot of pain right now. But the truth is, he has. As I look around, not too many of us have missed too many meals. I don't. So I'm just saying we've taken nourishment, all right? And some of us a little more than our share. But so God has given us that, hasn't he? He's blessed us. You have a roof over your head. You got here probably not by hitchhiking, but you drove a car. You've had meaningful employment. Some of you have retirement funds that are laid aside, either a pension or something that you yourself have saved, and you've retired now and you're living off that. All sorts of blessings that God has provided for you. Do you have meaningful relationships in your life? A family, children, grandchildren? What do you have? All of this is God's blessing for you. The truth is, in this country, we live with an embarrassment of riches. We are wealthier than 2/3 of the world's population, at least. Most everyone in here is. 2/3 of the world's population, I'm told, still goes to bed hungry at night. That doesn't happen to us unless we're trying to lose a few pounds, and then we may go to bed hungry. I've done that a few times. I got to feeling sorry for myself until I realized that some people did that without an option. It was no choice. They had to go to bed hungry. So then I got over myself. We are blessed, and God has provided those blessings in our past. There are times that God has blessed you and directed you that you're not even aware of. So it's important to rehearse those things. God, you've done this in the past. You've blessed me in the past. You have intervened in my life in the past. I know that you will again in the future. In this land, he says to our forefathers as a place to live forever, and they've lived in it, verse 8, and they built you a sanctuary there for your name, saying, should evil come upon us, the sword or the judgment or pestilence or famine, we will stand before this house and before your name that is in this house and cry to you in our distress, and you will hear and deliver us. The next thing they did is they talked about God's promises. They said, we will build this house in trouble. Well, the reason they said that is because God told them to say that. That was God's instruction to them. Now, whenever a sword or pestilence or famine comes your way, come to this house, call upon my name, and I will answer you. It was his promise to them. They are here. Jehoshaphat here is simply recounting the promise of God for his deliverance. I think that's another good thing for us to do. And again, notice our first three sections of this prayer. We've prayed about God, his power. We've prayed about God, how he has blessed in the past to do for us in the future. This is all about God so far, not about the problem, right? It's all about God. So what are God's promises to you? Now, one place we get in trouble is we begin to expect from God things he's never promised. We get a comfortable life, we like it, we want it to stay this way, and when it's taken away from us, we blame God. He never promised that wouldn't happen to you. Sometimes bad things happen. They happen. I used to get angry because anger was my go-to emotion. It's what I did well, and so it's what I returned to. And I remember I had a crisis in my life and a significant loss, and I got angry over it, and I entered into a period of depression over that for quite some time. And then when finally I began to analyze my anger, I realized that I was angry with God because I thought he owed me better than what he had given to me. Because of all my hard work. After all, I've sacrificed for you, Lord. How you repay me? That really was the attitude. I was expecting things from God he never promised. He never promised that there would be no pain, no loss, no sorrow. He promised that he would be with me through the pain, the loss, and the sorrow. And so I repented of that attitude. I asked him to forgive me for my sin and to change my heart so that my lived theology would be congruent with my preached theology. And he did that. He did it so wonderfully that when my wife of 40 years had pancreatic cancer and was going to die, unless God performed a miracle, I didn't get angry. I never turned to anger, which was surprising to me because that had always been my course in the past. I would be angry. But instead I was grateful for the 40 years I'd had with her. And I asked my wife if she was angry. And she said no, which didn't surprise me because that's who she was. Not. She said, I've had 60 years of immaculate health, and some people never get a day. I've had 40 years of a marvelous marriage, and some people never know that. Over 40 years of wonderful, exciting, fulfilling ministry, some people never know that. She talked about her children, her grandchildren, her extended family. She said, should I be angry with God that all of that lasted only 60 years and not 80? That just seems to me to be terribly ungrateful. So no, I'm not angry. Attitude. It didn't surprise me that she would do that. What surprised me is that I was there as well. And I've never gotten angry over it. Hurt, pain, emptiness, lonely, sorrow, yes, but no anger. Because I've reminded myself of what God has promised and what he has not promised. And what he's promised is that he would help me through my sorrow. And he's done just that. He's always been faithful to me. And he's given me more than what he promised. He never promised me a 40-year marriage. He didn't promise that to me. He didn't promise the ministry that I had with my wife. He didn't promise that, but I had it. And so it is important that I remember what God has promised and not be afraid to call upon him for his promises. When I have a need, I said, you promised this, Lord. I'm laying this one at your feet, and I'm trusting you with this. So that's what Jehoshaphat does. He reminds Israel of God's promise and says, we're going to come and claim that. Now, after these first about God and his who he is, God and what he's done, God and his promises to what he'll do in the future, now he goes to the problem itself. Verse 10. Now behold, the sons of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir, whom you did not let Israel invade when they came out of the land of Egypt, they turned aside from them and did not destroy them. See how they are rewarding us by coming to drive us out from your possession, which you have given us as an inheritance. That's the description. He doesn't glorify it. He doesn't dwell on it. He doesn't make it bigger than it is. He doesn't make it smaller than it is. He just states the facts. Now, he has a little editorial comment there. Who you would not let us destroy, but we turned aside from them. Let's see how they're rewarding us. All right, we'll grant him that. That's okay. But basically, he describes the problem. This is what's going on. And we need your help. And now he asks specifically for his help. Verse 12. Will you not judge them? For we are powerless before this great multitude who are coming against us, nor do we know what to do. And I love this next phrase. This is perfect. But our eyes are on you. That's not a bad phrase to put at the entrance to every sanctuary. Our eyes are on you. It's not a bad phrase to hold on to every time you're facing a real trial in your life. Our eyes are on you, Lord. I'm keeping my eyes on you. I've told you what the problem is. I'm trusting you. And notice what he asks. He just simply says, Lord, judge them. You be the judge. If they need to win, let them win. But if you feel like that this is wrong, then you be the judge and you enact justice. That was the prayer of the Old Testament prophets. They wanted justice. Of course, in their minds, justice meant the destruction of their enemies. That's what they wanted. They were not so much praying for heaven as they were praying for judgment against their enemies. That's justice. And so perhaps there's a bit of that in this as well, this prayer as well. I'm asking you, Lord, to destroy them. That's okay, too, to ask that under these circumstances. He doesn't tell God how to do it. Open up the earth, swallow them. He doesn't tell him how to do it. He just says, you know what? This is bigger than us. We want your justice to be done. So we're going to watch you and see, because we can't handle this. I like the fact that he admitted that he was powerless. Sometimes we get to thinking we've got the resources. If we just are smart enough with them, we can solve this. When really, for most of our problems, we really are powerless. We can mess most anything up given the opportunity. We're just powerless. And so let's admit that. I'm powerless to affect my own salvation. I'm powerless to govern my own life. So Lord, take care of it. Let your will be done. My eyes are on you. That's what Jehoshaphat does. So that's the model prayer. And he stops with that. It says, and all Judah was standing before the Lord with their infants, their wives, and their children. But the Lord does not let them stand there and wait for long. He sends an answer, and he sends it through a surprising source. Then in the midst of the assembly of the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jehaziel, the son of Zechariah, the son of Benaiah, the son of Jael, the son of of the sons of Asaph. Ooh, wait a minute, there's a name I finally recognize. Asaph. If you've read the Psalms, you've read Psalms written by Asaph. Who was he? He was a Levite who worked in the temple. His primary job was to write and perform music for the worship services. And he was also David's personal priest. He was basically his personal priest, who him and instructed him and prayed with him and worked with him. Musician primarily. That's a beautiful wind, isn't it? I'll try this, see if that helps. He was a musician primarily. That's not going to help. And it's also interesting to me that all of Israel so valued the work of musicians that they were paid. Paid just like the preachers, because worship was important to them. They thought that worship was music and prayer and musicians, for that as were the pastors. They valued worship. Today, much of the worship I see as I go from church to church is something somebody threw together Friday night, if we're lucky. Sometimes it's Sabbath morning. When someone stands in the pulpit and says, Joe, don't you have the opening prayer? Somebody didn't plan. Somebody didn't plan. I'm sorry, folks, but we can do better. More than that. It's one of the identifying characteristics that's pointed out in the three angels' messages. This is a group of people who worship. They worship the Creator God of the universe. Worship is an identifying factor of God's people. We ought to pay attention to it, because worship is our offering that we give to Him, and we need to take it seriously. Whether that means paying musicians or not, I'm not going to go there. You do the math and you talk about this. But I know in my previous pastorate, we required rehearsal for church. If you can't rehearse, you can't be a part of church leadership this week, maybe next week, because we owe God better than that. We planned it months in advance. We timed it. We had a floor director who made sure that gave hand signals. You've gone too long. Shut up. Sit down. We kept it on time. I hate dead time. So there was, boom, something happened. And you were told when to start walking there because this person's going to be done in 10 seconds. You need to be at the pulpit when it's your turn. so that we don't wait and watch you walk up. Those are, I know that's nitpicky things, but you know what? We owe God better. We owe God our best. And it doesn't mean that everything has to be of a professional quality. You don't have the resources to do that everywhere. But you can give them your best. You can plan it. You can do it well. And so this man who God gave the answer to was a musician. He was one of the ones charged with making sure that we gave God our best, and a part of that meant music. And isn't it interesting that God sent his word to this man, a musician, not to the priest, not to a prophet, but to this individual, he sent this word. In the midst of the assembly, the word of the Lord came upon Jehaziel. All the sons he is down to Asaph, and he said this. So here's his word given to a musician. He answers the prayer of Jehoshaphat. This is what he said. Listen, all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem and King Jehoshaphat. Thus says the Lord to you. We're going to try that and not this. Okay. We'll see if that will. There we go. We'll see if that will stop the blowing, because I've got enough hot wind as it is. Come from Texas, so I got a lot of it. In the midst of the assembly, it came to Jehaziel, and it said, listen, all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem and King Jehoshaphat. Thus says the Lord to you, do not fear or be dismayed because of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God. Now that first phrase, do not fear, the most frequently repeated negative command of Scripture is fear not. I read someplace where someone did the math. He counted 165 times throughout Scripture that this negative command is given, one for every day of the year. If you want to know the one thing that God does not want you to be, it's afraid. He wants you to have no fear. Jesus said, I've not given you a spirit of fear. By the way, if you go to a religious meeting and you hear the preaching, and as the result of that preaching, you leave there afraid, whether it be of your salvation, the plagues, if you leave there afraid, you experienced a spirit, but it was not the Spirit of God. Do you believe that? Conspiracy theories, it's not the Spirit of God. Germinates fear, elevates the enemy. Focus on what? I don't care who's got a conspiracy. Don't tell me Pope's doing, the president, or anybody else. I want to know what Jesus is doing. Let me know what Jesus is doing, and then I know what I can do. And they can do their worst against me. I don't care. Don't tell me what they're doing. I don't care. I care about Jesus. Because the other germinates fear. And fear is not the Spirit of God. Fear itself is a short-term motivator and a poor one at that. It's a terrible motivator. Lasts long, but love lasts forever. Tell me what my Jesus is up to. That's what I care about. And that's the first part of this message from God through the musician, Jehaziel, was do not be afraid nor be dismayed of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours but God's. And that, again, that's another great phrase that maybe ought to be put on our foreheads or across the entrance to our churches. It's not your battle. Tomorrow, and now he gives instruction. This is what God says. Tomorrow go down against them. Behold, they will come up by the ascent of Ziz. He's got a scouting report. He has military intelligence on what the enemy's about to do. He knows where they are. He knows where they're going to come. This is where you go meet them. Go meet them there, because that's the way they're going to choose. And you will find them at the end of the valley in front of the wilderness of Jezreel. All right, that's pretty specific. You need not fight this battle. Stand to see the salvation of the Lord on your behalf, O Judah and Jerusalem. Do not fear or be dismayed. He repeats it again, just to make sure they get it. Don't be afraid. Tomorrow go out to face them, for the Lord is with you. That's pretty specific, right? He gave them an intelligence report, told them exactly what to do, where to meet them, and the main thing he said is don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch. No, I said that again. He said, stand still. It's not your battle. This is God's battle. He's going to fight this for you. So just stand still and enjoy it. Enjoy the view. Now, Jehoshaphat, when he hears this, what has he seen so far? He's seen nothing. He's got the word of a musician. That's what he's got. So what does he say? Jehoshaphat bowed his head with his face to the ground, and all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem fell down before the Lord, worshiping the Lord. The Levites, the sons of Korahites, stood up to praise the Lord God of Israel with a very loud voice. So already they're giving thanks. They've seen nothing. They got the word of a musician, and they're singing praise to God. They're thanking him. So the story continues. They rose early in the morning and went out to the wilderness of Tekoa. And when they went out, Jehoshaphat stood and said, "Listen to me, O Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Put your trust in the Lord your God, and you shall be established. Put your trust in seed." And when he had consulted with the people, he appointed those who sang to the Lord and those who praised him in holy attire as they went out before the army and said, "Give thanks to the Lord, his loving kindness is everlasting." So basically, he said, here's our military strategy. We've got everybody dressed up in the choir robes over here. You're going to lead us into battle. You're going ahead of the army. The army's going to bring up the rear. The choir is leading us into battle. Now, if I'm the head of the choir that week, I'm thinking, this would be an excellent opportunity to get some experience. I don't think they did that, though. I don't think that happened. All right, we're going to take the choir into battle. And notice the song they sang. It said the choir led them into battle. And what they sang was, "Give thanks to the Lord, for his loving kindness is everlasting." That word loving kindness, it is translated from a Hebrew word, which is hesed or chesed, depending who's transliterated. It is a word so rich in its meaning, it takes 26 English words to translate. It is translated as loving kindness, steadfast love, mercy, love, and a variety of other things. Basically, it refers to a love of fanaticism. A love that is intense, where the lover cannot get the beloved off their mind 24/7. They would stop at nothing to be with the beloved. It is so intense and so fanatical a love is never once used to describe a man's love for a woman, because it's not fanatical enough. It's never once used to describe a woman's love for a man, even though I believe that they have a greater innate capacity to love than do men. And that love is not strong enough, not fanatical. It's never used to describe a woman's love for her children. You can't talk about crazy love. You women are nuts when it comes to your kids. Do not get between Mama Bear and those cubs, because you got problems. But that love is not strong enough to deserve this word in Scripture. The only time this ever is to describe God's love for you. He's fanatical about you. He's crazy. He can't get you off his mind 24/7. He never stops thinking about you. He would stop at nothing for you. Max Lucado said it best. He said, if God had a refrigerator, your picture would be on it. If he had a wallet, your photograph would be in it. He could live any place in the universe he chose to live, but he's chosen to live in your heart. You got to face it. God's crazy about you. God is crazy about you. His fanatical love. You know where else this word is used? Psalm 23, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." That word mercy is hesed. Surely goodness and his fanatical, crazy, devoted love will follow me. And that word follow is probably a bad translation. It'd be better translated stalk. Surely his crazy love will stalk me all the days. Don't you love that? You think of stalk in a negative connotation. But love, I like that. His fanatical, crazy love will stalk me. You can't get away from him. That's what he's promising you, and that's what David's saying in Psalm 23. So they finished singing the song, right? Verse 22, "When they began singing and praising, the Lord set ambushes against the son of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, who had come against Judah, so they were routed. For the sons of Ammon and Moab rose up against the inhabitants of Mount Seir to destroying them completely, and when they had finished with the inhabitants of Seir, they helped destroy." What happened? This is according to the Revised Substandard Version of Tucker. Here's what I think happened. They realized someone had given away military intelligence, because these people knew exactly where to find them. They knew what their strategy was. They knew where they were coming, and they met them there. And so confident of victory were they sent their choir in first, already singing songs of thanksgiving and praise for their victory. And they thought, somebody gave us away. We're dead meat. And two of them looked at each other. I think it's the other guy. What do you think? They killed him off. Once they were finished with that, they looked at each other and said, I'm not so sure about you. They took care of each other, and before long they were all dead, thinking that the other had given away military secrets and betrayed them. And then when Judah got there, everybody's dead.
When Judah came to the lookout of the wilderness, they looked toward the multitude, and behold, they were corpses lying on the ground. No one escaped. When Jehoshaphat and his people came to, they found much among them, including goods, garments, valuable things, which they took for themselves, more than they could carry. And they were 3 days taking the spoil because there was so much. Not only did they not get destroyed, they got rich out of the process, carrying away the spoils, because it's not their battle. Same thing is true of you. Whatever you're facing, whatever struggle, whatever trial, quit fighting it yourself. It's not your battle. You're a fight. It's already been fought for you. Even your sanctification is a gift that comes from God for you. Dwell in Him and He changes you. He changes you. I've tried to sanctify myself. I made a list of my sins once. At least all of those that I knew about or was willing to admit to, I guess. And I started working on sin number 1, and I started trying to stomp it out. And I did pretty good with it, and I got bored with that, so I went to sin number 2. And about the time I got started with number 2, number 1 was back with. I've never been able to stomp sin out of my life. But when I keep my eyes on Jesus and I focus on His love crowds it out. It's a gift from Him. It's not me. He crowds sin out of my life. That's a gift from Him as well. Quit fighting that battle. Quit fighting the battle of your finances. Do the right thing, but give it to Him. Because it's not your battle. Your children, they're not your, love them. Do the right thing. They're not your battle. None of it's your battle. Years ago, my wife and I were in Australia. It was about, 10 years ago now, 8, doing some family life there. And while we were there, we met a young woman and her husband. We were at Avondale College, and he was a ministerial student at Avondale College, preparing for the Adventist ministry. And she had 2 children, working full-time because trying to put her husband through school, so they were always broke. And she had a 3rd one on the way. Now, you think about that, and if that doesn't depress you thinking about it, you're not thinking. You've seen the look on the faces of mothers of young children. You've seen that look, the tired look? They've earned that look. They've earned it. There's a reason why they look tired and depressed. They are. They've got a reason for that. Look. And she was, it was putting a strain on their marriage. And so we did what we could to help. We were only there a short time, but I counseled with them some, and then we left. And then she found me on Facebook and friended me on Facebook and started sending me questions on Facebook about her marriage. And I did my best to help her. Facebook's a bad place to counsel, but I did what I could as I tried to help them. I remember some months later, Gail and I were in Butte, Montana, doing a Mad About Marriage seminar at that church. We did a Friday night presentation for Sabbath morning. We'd invited everybody to come to church, and I preached, and then we fed them, and then Sabbath afternoon, we finished the last 3.5 hours of the seminar. We'd finished Friday night, and it was Sabbath morning, and we were in our hotel room and getting ready to go to church, and I'd gotten dressed, and Gail was still getting ready, so I went to Facebook and posted where we were, what we were doing. She was still getting ready, so I went to Twitter and tweeted. I tweet, therefore I'm a twit? I don't know. So I tweeted on Twitter, and then she was still makes them longer. But they look so much better than us when they're through that it's worth the wait. So gentlemen, quit your belly aching. Just quit your belly aching. I tell you what, you know that it's a good thing to wait when you don't have anyone to wait for. Then you wish you could wait. You know what I mean? So praise God that she looks better than you, because she does. And thank the Lord that she cares enough to take the time she needs to get ready and just wait. But when I went back to Facebook again after tweeting, there was a message there from this young woman in Australia. Her name's Jackie. So I clicked on it, and it said, I'm sitting alone in my parlor here in Australia late on a Saturday night. Just wondering if anyone cares, because this is the last night of my life. So, all right, so that's got my antenna up. So I write back immediately. Her name's Jackie. Jackie, what's going on? What's happening? Verse back and forth, and I tell Gail to be praying about this as she gets ready. And the bottom line is that she was abused as a child. And now that the stresses of her life were so huge, she found herself starting to abuse her own children, because abused children are 5 times as likely to abuse their own children. It's just, When the Bible talks about things going down to the third and fourth generation, it's not a curse, it's a description of what happens. It just happens. This is carried on from one generation to the next. It's not a curse, it's just descriptive of what happens. She was finding herself abusing her children, and she didn't want to do that. So she prayed to be delivered from it, and her prayers, in her view, had not been answered. So in desperation, she prayed to Satan. And Satan said, I can help you with this. You're the problem. If you just kill yourself, your children will be free of you because you're worthless. And so she told Satan's child. Satan was her Lord and Master, and she'd already taken some pills and had more to take. And I wrote back, Satan's a liar. He's a filthy liar. And Satan is not Lord of your life. Jesus Christ is Lord, and you're not going to die tonight. It's a rather bold statement, I know. But there was a time to throw caution to the wind. I said, you're not going to die tonight. She said, you can't stop me. I said, no, I don't have to. God's going to stop me. How's he going to do that? I said, I don't know, but here you book. Explain that one to me. You're half a world away. She said, well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it. So I kept praying and thinking about this, and it suddenly occurred to me that I had another Facebook friend in Australia who never sleeps. I know this because I've traveled the world all over, and every time zone I've checked Facebook, and he's always awake on Facebook. I don't know. The man has gone without sleep. He blames Zuckerberg, I think. But anyway, he's always on Facebook. So I took a chance, and his name is Bob. I sent him a message. Bob, this is Mike. Are you up? This is an emergency. And sure enough, he was up, middle of the night. Here I am, mate. What can I do for you? I said, do you live in such and such town, the town where Jackie and her husband live? No, that's on the other side of the continent from me. But you know what? I got a sister that lives there. Seriously? You got a sister that lives in this town? What are the odds? I said, I know the first and last name of Jackie's husband. He said, I'll get right back to you, mate. So he called her in the middle of the night, woke her up, made her get her phone book. She opened up the phone book, sent back a message. There's only one family listed in the phone book by that surname. Here's the number listed. I hope it's the right one. He sent me that message. He said, I'll be praying for you, mate. I said, thank you. I appreciate that. Then here I am in Butte, Montana with the cell phone. How do you call Australia? I don't know. So while I'm talking to Jackie over the page of my browser and I go to Google, Google's a wonderful thing. Let me tell you, Google can tell you most anything. And I said, how do I call Australia with a cell phone? And up came dialing Australia for Dummies. And I figured that's me. Not exactly that, but it gave me step-by-step directions, basically, on how to do this. So I follow all the things. I put in all the right numbers, and I hit the button and prayed, Lord, do not let this be China, you know. And it rings, and it rings, and it rings, and finally someone picks up the phone. And I hear a beautiful Australian accent, female voice, a little bit groggy from drugs, say hello. I said, Jackie? Yes? This is Mike Tucker calling you from the United States. I just called to tell you Satan's a liar, Jesus is Lord, and you're not going to die. I said, this is Mike Tucker. I know who you are. How did you get my number? God gave it to me. You give me a better answer, okay? God gave it to me. What? Absolutely. He told me to call you and tell you you're not going to die. Well, yeah, I'm going to die. Satan's Lord. I said, no, if you're going to die, why are you talking to me right now? We're not got you on the phone. We kept going back and forth, and I realized I still wasn't getting any place because the drugs had already affected her mind. And so I'm praying, and I said, Lord, give me another plan. And I finally came up with another idea. I said, is your husband at home? Well, yeah, he's in the other room asleep. I said, I'd like to talk to him. Well, she said, that's a bad idea. He's sleeping. I said, no, this is the best idea I've had all day. And I got very insistent. I got forceful enough that I thought she might hang up on me. But finally, she laid down the phone, pad across the room. In a few moments, I heard someone with heavier steps stumbling across the room. Phone picked up, and I heard a male voice, groggy with sleep, say, hello? I called him by name. Said, this is Mike Tucker from the United States calling you about something your wife told me on Facebook. He said, who? I said, Mike Tucker, I met you a few months ago when he said, I know who you are. how did you get my number? God gave it to me. What? I said, that's not important right now, sir. I'm calling you because of your wife. Jackie told me on Facebook that she's committing suicide tonight. Jackie, what have you done? I said, sir, listen to me. Listen to me. Yes? She's already taken some pills. And so what I need you to do is two things. Two things, and you got to promise you're going to do these for me. Okay? Number one, in just a moment, I'm going to hang up the phone. And you need, first of all, to call an ambulance and psychiatric attention. She needs that tonight. She needs it going forward. That's number one. Will you do that? Yes. Number two is this. What I want you to do for Jackie is listen and love. Don't tell her she's right or wrong. Don't correct her. Don't fix her. Don't argue with her. Just simply listen and love her. Will you do that? Yes. I said, remember, I'll do that. All right, I'm going to hang up now. You call an ambulance. Okay. Click. We go to church. I asked the congregation of Butte, Montana to pray for Jackie. 3 days later, I got a message from Jackie. She's still alive. Go figure. All I can think is Jesus must actually be Lord. What are you thinking? She wrote me this message. She said, I want to thank you for caring enough to help me the other night. Perfect. But they're better. I'm feeling better. So just thank you for caring. P.S. Seriously, how did you get my number? A few months passed, and I got a message from Jackie's husband. And the message said, it's Sabbath morning here in Australia, and I'm about ready to go preach a sermon. He's still a ministerial student. He said, but you came to mind. Note, I had to thank you for what you did for my wife and for me the other night. He said, my wife and I were both headed for divorce and we knew it. We both knew it. We hadn't talked about it, but we knew it. He said, but after you called, I did what you told me to. I listened and I loved. And now divorce is not even a part of the conversation. It's not going to happen. He said, I've always known that but I didn't realize how serious things were. But now she's reading the Bible not to prove anything right or wrong, but just to know Jesus. And she asked if she could help me write my sermons, and I've said yes. And so we've written sermons together, and she helped me last night write this one, and I asked if she wanted to come hear me preach it. She said no, but this morning she's up and dressed, and the children are up and dressed as well, and they're going with me. So I just wanted to write, thank you for caring. P.S. No, seriously, how did you get my number? 3 days later, Jackie wrote me, not knowing that her husband had written me. And again, she thanked me. She said that things were improving. She still has struggles and still does. But again, she thanked me and told me that she knew that eventually healing would be hers. And again, there was a P.S. Did you get my number? I have maintained contact with Jackie for a couple of years since that incident. And last fall, I went back to Australia to preach for a camp meeting. This was just 6 months after Gail died. Maybe even less than that, maybe more like 5. And when I preached, Jackie and her husband and her 3 children were at every meeting. And the day before I left, I had the privilege of rebaptizing Jackie. I'm still in touch with her. She's still in pain, ups and downs, but her life is moving in the right direction. Because you see, Jackie is learning and relearning that it's not her battle to fight. The battle is God's. Her husband is learning that too. It's not his battle, that lesson. Jehoshaphat learned it. Maybe it's not a bad lesson for you either. Maybe it's not a bad lesson. Dear one, I don't know what battle you're trying to fight. It's not yours. The battle is God's. Turn your eyes upon him. Trust him. Rest in him. Because truthfully, it's not your battle.